chair, please. I hope there are enough chairs for everyone. My name is George Kane. I'm a longtime member of Minnesota Atheists, a past director in several positions, and I'm currently the Public Policy Committee chair. And our first speaker, I'd like to introduce the president of Minnesota Atheists, Heather Hegi.
Thank you for joining us today for the Day of Reason, a day to celebrate truth and reason, to raise public awareness about the persistent threat to religious freedom, and to rally for secular government. This event is hosted by Minnesota Atheists with co-hosts Humanists Minnesota and Rochester area freethinkers. We have been holding this rally for the National Day of Reason nearly every year since 2005. Being here today matters. We invite state legislators to address the audience, which helps bring awareness of our presence here today. But yeah, it makes a difference to be here because it makes a difference not only in Minnesota state government, but in federal government. Because state legislators, they may advise the federal legislators, or they may even become a federal legislator themselves. Representative Ilhan Omar spoke to us in 2017, and she now represents the Congressional District 5 in Congress. This year, the United States celebrates 250 years as a nation. Our nation was founded by people wanting to escape religious persecution, so they wanted this government to have no role in religion. They understood that if government gets entangled with religion, they may not promote their sect of religion, so best not be involved at all. Unfortunately, our government has showed favoritism to a general deism, and they took a step backwards in the 1950s when they added "Under God" to our Pledge of Allegiance, and "In God We Trust" was adopted as our national motto and added to our currency. However, that's kind of nothing compared to what the threats we are seeing today with Christian nationalism rhetoric being promoted by the Trump administration. So it has never been so important to affirm our commitment to the constitutional wall of separation between religion and government. We need to stand up for reason as our guiding principle of our secular democracy, so we may go another 250 years or more of having a secular government. We have a great lineup of speakers today. I would like to thank Steve Peterson for helping us plan today's event. And George Kane for emceeing today. And I don't want to take up any more of your time, so I'm going to hand it back over to George.
One feature of this event every year is that we can't stick to a schedule. And that's because the legislature is in session and speakers come down to speak to us when they can break free. And so when they arrive, we have to change the schedule to get them in and not impose too much on their time. And one has already arrived. This is Representative Andy Smith, who is a DFL representative of District 25B. So welcome.
Thanks, George. Hi there, everyone. So glad that I could break free, as George would say, to be with you today. I represent District 25B, which is in Rochester, Minnesota. This is my second term. I'm speaking to you today because I believe wholeheartedly that the best society that our great, diverse humanity can enjoy is a society that is multicultural, multi-ethnic, and enjoys and celebrates the religious worship of all of its people. That's what we want Minnesota to be. That's what we want the United States to be. And that's what it was founded to be. And yet, we see in this building that not everyone believes that central premise. Christian nationalism is on the rise, and it's not on the flanks or not in the extremes. It's been in this building, in that big room in the House of Representatives. Just over the past 3 weeks, I have heard a representative say that we don't need to worry about climate change because climate change is not in the Bible. I heard a representative say that we cannot pass common sense gun legislation because those good laws that we have data for that will stop political and gun violence in our state couldn't legislate the human heart. The only thing that could legislate the human heart was the gospel of Jesus Christ. We heard a Christian pastor who also serves as a representative say that because of the Bible, trans girls can't play children's sports. When we are taking our own beliefs and pressing them into others, we are creating a new thing in the United States, Christian supremacy, Christian nationalism, which is dangerous. We cannot have that in the society that we live in. I don't know if you guys know much about my background. I actually grew up in an evangelical church. I have a master's of divinity from a conservative seminary. I can talk about the Bible all day long if people want. But it is folks like me, it's fellow Christians, and also those who are here who need to stand up against a type of Christianity that is trying to control the laws that are written in this house, as well as in Washington, D.C. I'm proud to stand up to that. I know you all are here today to stand up for that kind of society, and we will continue to fight. I want to finish off real quick my brief remarks with a story about my grandma, who I love deeply. She's 93 years old, and she lives in the Detroit area. She lives very close to Dearborn, Michigan, and I love her dearly, but one of her deep, deep fears is that Sharia law is taking place in Michigan. You might have heard this sort of far-right story being spun. But it was that discussion with my grandma that had a good turn to it. So I said, the reason you're concerned about Sharia law is that it is a religious law that you're scared will gain power over a culture that has people who don't agree with that kind of law. You don't agree with that. You're a Christian. But if you are against that, this religious law being put over everyone in a society, including you that you don't agree with, you cannot also advocate for your religion to be supreme over the laws of the land. We have to have laws that celebrate the differences that we have, recognize them, allow people to have their different heritage, their different ethnicities, their different belief systems, and yet be able to live in harmony. Our founding fathers believed that was the case, and we today still believe that that is the case. Thank you for fighting for that future, and let's keep fighting. Thank you.
If Steve Peterson gave any of you the schedule, you might as well throw it away. We're not following the schedule. But that's not a complaint, because we're very happy that legislators take their time to speak to us. And when they arrive, don't want to impose on their time too much. We want to get them up here. So our next speaker will be Sandra Feist, who is DFL representative of District 39B. Sandra.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here at the Capitol. It's an honor to speak to you. I looked really hard. I feel like I usually have a cool quote to share, and I didn't get a cool quote this year. But I've quoted Kurt Vonnegut in previous years. He's my favorite humanist. Kurt Vonnegut. I think about Cat's Cradle a lot when I think about the work that you're doing and humanism, and the concept that actually, this is not Kurt Vonnegut. This is just what I think about now. But the concept that our moral core and our commitment to one another as citizens, as human beings, does not need to be tied to any one religious doctrine. And that is so important when we look at our government institutions and our leaders. In this moment when we have a lot of people who are trying to tell us there is one way to be good, there is one way to be a good citizen, to be a good neighbor, it's really disturbing. I was a board member of the ACLU of Minnesota for a while, and so this is something that I've thought about a lot, and it's been interesting to be on the inside and thinking about what kind of a leader do I want to be. I guess I'll just throw out there one other way that we can all be better to one another and hopefully have good dialogue on these important and sometimes fraught issues. There's something called the Dignity Index. And if you Google it, it's like dignity.us. And it's a scale of 1 to 8. And at 1, when we look at people who we disagree with, they are evil. It is our moral imperative to destroy them. And then when you get to 1, actually, I might be inverting them. But anyway, when you get to the other end of the spectrum, everybody has human dignity and human worth. And even when we disagree with them profoundly, we can acknowledge their humanity. And I got a really angry email from a constituent recently about ethnic studies and how important it is. And their response to me was kind of on one end of that spectrum. And I'm going to email them back and send them the Dignity Index and remind them that we all need to see one another as human beings, even when we disagree so vehemently that we feel sometimes like that their rhetoric might be dehumanizing us and our beliefs. But I believe that the only way forward is going to be all of us kind of coming together as one human community and realizing that what it means to be good and committed to one another and our collective well-being is not tied to any specific religious doctrine. So thank you all so much for inviting me to speak to you today. Thank you all for being here. It's really, really important. So thank you. Bye.
And I think now we can return to the schedule until the next legislator arrives. And the next speaker is David Breeden. He is a director of Humanists MN, and he's the senior minister of the First Unitarian Society in Minneapolis. He's written several books on theological topics and translates the writings of philosophers of classical antiquity. There are stairs here. You go.
I'll do this.
All right, very good.
Maybe. Thank you, sir.
Right. Thank you.
Actually, I'm retired from First Unitarian Society at this point. So I have joined the board of the Secular Coalition of America in my spare time. And that is an umbrella group representing in D.C. People like us fighting the good fight. We're gathered here for the Day of Reason, not as something abstract. Clearly, we've learned that over the winter. In recent months, what political terrorism can do to a community has become absolutely clear to us. Political terrorism. We have seen what happens when government becomes addled by one particular religious interpretation of one particular branch, of one particular group of religions, one religious tradition. And then that mistakes their own interpretation for we the people. Well, that's simply not true, and it's dangerous. Of all the human emotions, the one that I fear most is certitude. Certitude. When government seizes religion or religion seizes government, belief hardens into requirements. What should be open to free choice becomes socially coerced. Prayers become performances. Law requires certain words to be put on certain walls for certain particular reasons. Separation, however, ensures that no single worldview can claim ownership of the public space. That's what separation is about. That means a church a synagogue, a mosque, a humanist gathering, or a room full of atheists can all exist without fear of state interference or favoritism. Each can speak in its own voice and it's in its own integrity. Each can call on its authentic call for justice, not some kind of stereotypical one. Separation does not silence religion. It allows religion and no religion the freedom to be who and what you are. It keeps all citizens free. The First Amendment draws a careful line. Government shall not establish religion, and it shall not prohibit the free exercise thereof, because real belief cannot be coerced. Think about it a moment. Belief cannot be coerced. Government can't pass laws that make you believe if you don't want to, or you can't. No government can command a human being's inner life. A secular government is not a government without values, as a matter of fact. A secular democracy is committed to fairness, equal protection, public reason, and the common good. It creates a civic civil space where people of many beliefs and no religion can deliberate together as equals. As equals. Religious voices are welcome in the space where separation occurs. Humanist voices are welcome. Agnostic voices are welcome. Atheist voices are welcome, but none enter secular space as hierarchically superior. No one enters as hierarchically superior, but as equals, as citizens, as neighbors. So we can argue all we want, but we have to listen, and we have to somehow create community. That is democracy at its best. There's no thrones, only some chairs at a table. In a diverse society, this balance will never be effortless, of course, but the principle must remain clear. Government must never favor one faith over another or faith over non-faith, and it must not interfere with conscience unless some kind of real harm might result. And we saw real harm in January. That's how it works. In the end, the separation of religion and government is an act of trust and community among us. The separation of religion and government trusts groups and individuals to seek meaning in their own ways. It trusts communities to gather around shared values without government interference. And it trusts that together we can be both deeply moral and genuinely free. The separation of religion and government allows faith and unfaith to remain in respectful discussion. Separation allows democracy to remain in respectful discussion, and it allows conscience to remain honest and free. Here in Minnesota, on this day of reason, may we recommit ourselves to defending the open space where free ideas may be freely exchanged. May we defend the dignity of conscience. May we defend the richness of our plural community. And may we remember reason is not the opposite of faith or the enemy of faith. Reason is the common language by which faiths, doubts, and convictions learn to live together in community and in democracy. Thank you. Thanks.
All right, once again, another representative has been able to break free from his legislative session to spend a few minutes with us. That's Representative David Gottfried, and he's a DFL representative of District 40B.
Well, hey, folks. My name is David Gottfried. I am a representative from District 40B. That is the Roseville Shoreview area of the North Metro. Do we have a Roseville Shoreview? There we are, right over here. Well, phenomenal. I want to dovetail a little bit on what Representative Feist was talking about as far as the dignity index. I took a minute to pull it up. And yeah, she was right. It is a scale from 1 to 8. At the very bottom part of that scale, at a 1, we have some of the most dehumanizing, demeaning things that you could say about a person. For example, they're not even human. It's our moral duty to destroy them before they destroy us. And at the very, very top of this dignity, human dignity scale, at the 8th rank is the most dignified way that you can refer to somebody. An example is each one of us is born with inherent worth, so we treat everyone with dignity no matter what. And in the wake of all the political violence that we have seen, this concept, this dignity index, was brought to us in the state legislature by Colin Hortman. That is Melissa Hortman and Mark Hortman's son. And it is something that I now try to adhere to as much as I possibly can, given where we are in our society right now. But let's talk a little bit about the context of this in the context of humanism versus some of the other ethos that we see in our society. I really enjoyed how the previous speaker talked about how religion within government can lead to one particular sect and one interpretation of one particular sect, dictating how people live their lives, and in some cases being used to justify horrible atrocities against other human beings. I have heard many folks in the name of religion speak at the bottom of that dignity index. And that's not to say that everyone who is religious does so. There are many beautiful, beautiful examples of people speaking at the highest level of that dignity index. But the danger of ascribing to a belief system and putting it into a formal government structure where it is open to interpretation and can be interpreted in a way that is very deleterious to other individuals means that we run the risk of speaking only entirely at the bottom of that dignity index. And if you look at the tenets, if you look at the commitments of humanism in our society, it is incredibly difficult. It is incredibly difficult to speak at the lower part of that dignity index if you are living by humanistic tenets, humanistic commitments. And so that is one of the reasons why I believe in a secular humanistic government, because it respects, go ahead. It respects the humanity of everyone, no matter what religion, what code, what creed you abide by. And I think it is incredibly, incredibly important for us to advocate for that separation of religious doctrine from our government entities so that we can make sure that people are protected, make sure that people are referred to in dignified matters, no matter what they believe, who they are, where they come from. And so I want to thank you for all of your work here today. I want to see more people coming in support of this movement. And I just want to thank you for sharing a bit of your afternoon with me here today. Thank you very much. Appreciate you all. Thank you.
We have a couple more legislators who've come down. We fit them into the schedule so as to not impose upon their time, or as least as we can. Our next speaker is familiar to the humanist, atheist, freethinker audience here in the Twin Cities. He is the DFL representative for District 43B, a co-chair of the Secular Government Caucus. So please, and one of the founders of the Secular Government Caucus. So please help me welcome Representative Mike Freiberg.
Yeah. Hi, thank you for that warm welcome. I really appreciate it. So I'm Mike Freiberg. I represent District 43B, and I'm short. This. Because I'm just seeing the top of people's heads. So, and So anyway, a few years ago I started the Secular Government Caucus. I'm glad to have co-chair Athena Hollins, representative from St. Paul, here with me too. So she'll be saying a few words as well. Just wanted to be efficient. We're up on the floor right now, so we don't have a whole lot of time. But I really appreciate you being here. I've spoken almost every year since that you've been coming, and it's only when I've had some sort of conflict like that I haven't been able to. But it's just so important for there to be a strong voice for non-religious people and humanists to make their views known at the Capitol. There is just such an overwhelming majority of religious views here, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, there's groups that are doing, like as Representative Gottfried mentioned, there are groups doing great work, like Faith in Minnesota, who are very concerned about making sure everyone has access to health care and housing, and I know that's a concern for humanists too. We want people to enjoy this life that they're given. So anyway, I just really appreciate you being here. It's an honor to speak to you every year, and feel free to reach out to me at any point you want to. Thank you.
I'm like, I don't know if I need this. I'm going to try it, though. Hi, everybody. Athena Hollins, and I am so happy to be here. I represent District 66B in St. Paul. Thank you all for being here. This is so important. I just wanted to take a second to address the elephant in the room, which is white Christian nationalism. It's sneaking up along our doorsteps every moment of every day, and we are constantly pushing back on it. And I think that it's really important for us to remember that not only is this ideology dangerous, it's also painful to a lot of folks in this space because it erases our rich, beautiful history in this country and reduces it down to just one version that's based on one religion that is totally antithetical to everything that we know about the America that we know and love. And so it's really important, not just because it is dangerous to our policy making, but it's also harmful to erase the history of people who have fought and died and worked hard to make America the beautiful, diverse, multicultural place that it is. And so I just think it's really important that we recognize that. And that's what we're trying to do when we come to the Capitol every single day. We just had one of our colleagues up on the floor speaking in Hmong and talking about how the Hmong community has contributed to America and the world that we live in. And I think that white Christian nationalism is trying to erase that. It's trying to erase the real history that is before our eyes. And it's incumbent upon all of us to do our best to fight back against that, because it is threatening our freedom, it's threatening our way of life, and frankly, I'm scared as a parent because I have to explain to my kids now how unrealistic what they're being taught is, right? Like what they hear on the news every day does not reflect the reality of the world that we live in, and it doesn't reflect what we're trying to do and what we're fighting for here at the Capitol. So everything that you're doing today is a part of that larger fight that we have in America. And I want to make it really clear, to Chair Freiberg's point, this isn't anti-religious. This is secular government to the benefit of all people. So thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time, and it's an honor to speak.
All right, we have one more legislator who's giving us our time and joining us. Representative Cedrick Frazier is the DFL representative for District 43A.
Hey everybody, how y'all doing? Good to see y'all today. And I'd say I can never say no when a constituent asks me to come up and speak to our group. So Heather, thank you for inviting me out. I appreciate it. You know, one of the things that I take very seriously about being in government, being an elected official, but about just in terms of the Constitution and how it applies, the idea of separation of church and state. The idea that in this country, we were not founded on any particular religion, that in this country, we are not beholden to particular tenets of any particular religion, that we give people the opportunity to live their lives free from any kind of indoctrination like that. And that's why I really appreciate this group, because you all represent that value that was a founding value when this country was established almost 250 years ago. And so I always think about that whenever we're doing this work, about how that is a unique thing to us when this company was established. It's unique to us to make sure that we created the opportunity for people to be themselves, for people to have their own thoughts, their own ideas, and that we protect that. And I will forever be, as an elected official, whatever role I am, and even just as a civilian, I will forever support that. I will fight for that, to maintain the freedom of expression and speech, and to be and do things that you want to do. And so I thank you all for being here today, and I thank you all for all the times that you send in spaces, when you're talking to your families, you're talking to your friends, you're in your community. I thank you for continuing to support that, because I believe it is a critical foundation of our government to have that ability to be free from those things and be free to express yourselves in the way that you want to. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for being supportive of that notion, and I will continue to support you. Thank you all.
All right, I don't think we have any legislators waiting in the wings, so we'll return to our organizational speakers. Our next speaker is Jim Saluz. He is the past president of Rochester Area Freethinkers, the host of many of that organization's social events, such as coffees and lunches, and he says happily retired. Please help me welcome James Saluz.
Good afternoon. It's always fun to come up here. It's a fun event. I really don't have anything earth-shaking to say. I'm just going to kind of give you a rundown of what Rochester Area Freethinkers does and is. We're actually established in 1997. We're a 501c3 educational organization, and we kind of see ourselves as a place for non-believers of various types to just come together and have some camaraderie and the like. We have a core group of members that seems to come to all events, and we have people that drop in sometimes every now and then, and sometimes just for once, and it's always interesting talking to people. We have a number of monthly events. One is we have a book club. This month they're reading the book Education for Extinction, which is a very good book about Native American boarding schools at the end of the 19th, early 20th centuries. We have a monthly meeting, usually at our local library, where we have discussions and presentations. We have a coffee get-together once a month and a happy hour once a month. And then we also have some other events that aren't on a monthly basis. We do trash pickup in a park. We have a trip to a local baseball game. We have solstice parties, both winter and summer. And we have a summer picnic. One interesting thing we do is our local STEM fair. We sponsor 2 awards for young skeptics, one high school and one junior high school. And we judge for those prizes. And coming up in a couple of weeks, we have a table at the local Pride Fest in Rochester. We're organized. We have with a board of directors, which holds a monthly meeting. We maintain a website, and our income is all through dues and donations. Thank you.
And continuing with our organizational speakers, we're very pleased to have a speaker from the largest of America's secularist organizations, the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Patrick Elliot is the legal director of that organization, so please help me welcome him.
Hello, everyone. As difficult as the audio is here, it's actually better in the Minnesota Capitol than the Wisconsin Capitol. I'll say it's just a tough environment. So hopefully you can all hear me today. Thank you, Minnesota Atheists and Humanists MN and all the groups that are here and organizing. Those of us who live in Minnesota, I live in Minnesota myself. And so while the groups and the attendees here today we all agree on state-church separation, I think a large part of the U.S. population has taken it for granted. And I agree, I think, with what Heather mentioned. We're going backwards in a lot of ways. And so I'm going to talk about kind of why state-church separation is important. And then I'm going to highlight what we're seeing at the Freedom from Religion Foundation as some of the biggest threats this year into 2026. And then I'll talk about what we're doing, what FFRF is doing, and I think what all of us collectively can do. And so when we talk about the state-church separation, again, some people don't see it as a threat. I think a majority of the justices on the U.S. Supreme Court don't seem to think it's an actual problem today. They want to, almost write out the Establishment Clause from the U.S. Constitution and then superpower the Free Exercise Clause in ways that are harmful to real people. And so sometimes when I think about why this is important, I have a specific case in mind that I've worked on, a legal case, and a little girl who was a participant in that case. And she suffered because of government and religion. So in 2017, in Mercer County, West Virginia, the schools there, all of the elementary schools had Bible classes. This is not that long ago. So starting in first grade, kids would go to Bible class. In their regular school classroom, a Bible teacher would come in, and the school district had prepared lessons that these teachers were supposed to be teaching. Of course, they said, this is not in a devotional manner, which is very doubtful that you could do that to elementary school kids and teach them the Bible. And so I requested the materials. Well, let's get a look at what you're teaching. So of course, that's not what they were doing. They were claiming they were teaching this as literature to kids as young as first grade. And one of the lessons that we had, there were some images. One of the lessons had dinosaurs with Adam and Eve. And then there was this statement, which said, this was the script for the teacher. It said, so picture Adam being able to crawl up on the back of a dinosaur. He and Eve could have their own personal water slide. Wouldn't that be so wild? And so one mom in the school district, probably reacted how we would all be, like, shocked at this. Just, and so she wanted to take her daughter out of these classes. She said, my daughter can't participate. And so at first, the school put her daughter in the back in a coat room area of the classroom, so ostracizing her there, but she could still hear the lessons and everything that was going on. And so the mother, again, her name was Elizabeth, the mother objected, and then they moved her. So this first grade girl is now sitting in a separate classroom by herself, reading while all of the other kids in her class are getting Bible lessons. And so because the school was so committed to bringing the Bible to what they called the unchurched, they were really ostracizing and mistreating children to teach fundamentalist Christianity. Even not, there's a lot of Christians who would not agree with the version of the curriculum that they were teaching. So her mom was very brave. We filed a lawsuit on her behalf as a plaintiff to stop the Bible classes. And the district didn't give up. They fought us. They even got a preliminary court win, which we had to appeal to a federal court of appeals, which ruled in our favor, and the case went back to the district court. And so it took about 5 years of fighting the school district before their school board eventually voted to completely disband Bible instruction classes in their elementary schools. And those classes had been running for 75 years. And so the problem of, wanting people wanting to inject religion into schools, it's not really a problem even just of the southern United States. We see it here in Minnesota. We see it at FFRF all across the country. So the two, recurring themes for this year that I wanted to highlight, first is just the religious groups want our public money but don't want to follow the rules. And this is a lot of the legal battles going right now could be summed up with that. We had one in Minnesota. I know we saw Representative Freiberg speak a little bit ago. A few years ago, he sponsored legislation to help combat one version of this, which is our PSEO program here, allows students in high school to take college courses. There are two colleges that dominate the program that wanted to make all of the participating students sign faith statements. And Minnesota changed the law. Of course, those schools challenged it. And unfortunately, this past August, a federal court here in Minnesota ruled that the state could not ban those faith statements. So these schools are still getting all the public money, but they don't want to follow the rules. And the next version of that this is actually, you'll probably hear a lot more about it this year and in the fall, the U.S. Supreme Court just decided to take another version of these cases. So this is a case called St. Mary's Catholic Parish versus Roy. So Colorado has a publicly funded pre-K program, and they allow religious schools to participate. But they just say, you can't discriminate against the families that want to participate in these programs. So the Catholic school said, well, we might want to discriminate against either the children or their parents for being LGBTQ+. So they sued. They lost to both of the lower courts. And now the U.S. Supreme Court is going to decide whether they can discriminate, whether Colorado's rule is constitutional. FFRF, we're going to be filing a friend of the court brief in that case, so we'll have a decision next year. And so I mentioned the funding piece, but the second thing that's happening with a nationwide effort underway is injecting religion into public school instruction. And thankfully in Minnesota, we've mostly not had this as much. There have been bills introduced here, but nothing is passed. That's not what's happening in other states. We're seeing bill after bill being introduced to put Christian instruction into classrooms. Utah passed a law a few weeks ago that requires the social studies classes to include Christian nationalist instruction and themes. That law permits instruction to start in grades that would impact kids as young as 8 years old. Multiple states have passed laws mandating the display of the Ten Commandments in the classrooms. I think we heard a reference to that earlier. So that leads me to my third thing, which is what can we all do about it? And so what the Freedom from Religion Foundation is doing, what others are doing, is we can collectively respond to these threats. So the first thing we can do is not give in and give up. I think there's a lot of I follow the groups that do the opposite of what we do, and they think we're all just going to let this happen or become complacent and let the Ten Commandments go up in school classrooms. We're not going to allow that to happen. We're not going to allow them to dismantle our secular government. So do not give in to them. And I think there's also this mismatch between what the politicians are doing and with what people actually want and what people actually think. Most Americans don't want this. Public school educators do not want to have to teach religious instruction in schools. Neither do their parents. In Minnesota, there was a Pew survey last year that asked, this was a nationwide survey, but in Minnesota, the respondents, 59% of respondents said they don't want teacher-sponsored prayer in schools. I would hope that number would be higher, but here, all of us in the room, we're in the majority. Most people here don't want this type of thing. So the other thing we're doing at FFRF is we're challenging these laws. I'm co-counsel on a number of cases fighting the Ten Commandments in schools in Texas, in Arkansas, in Louisiana. Those are 3 of the first states that have passed these laws. There have now been more states passing the Ten Commandments. It's frankly likely, I used to say, no, this case would never go to the Supreme Court, but now it seems very likely that we will have to go to the Supreme Court because the lower courts are letting this happen despite prior precedent. And so one of the other things, the second thing I think we can all do is just looking at the motivations for why people are doing this type of thing. It's often, they're not being honest, frankly. When you read the legislative reasons for the bills or when the people are at the podium saying why they want these bills, we have to look at some of the undercurrents. There seems to be a pushback against us, the secular Americans, or just religious pluralism in general. There's less of a domination by Christian groups in this country, just demographically. And so the push to put the Ten Commandments in schools is a good example. Is this really about the Ten Commandments? I think I said this last year at this. Most of these people don't know the Ten Commandments. We've had multiple instances where they mess them up and they miss one and they misorder them. So I won't get into that. But there's something else going on. It's officials wanting to appear to be pious. It's territory marking to say these schools are Christian schools. It's kind of holding on to that last grasp of there's people here who don't believe what I believe, and I need to, kind of try to force them to do it. Those are some of the themes I think that are going on. So we can't respond to those by just pointing out how their historic examples are all wrong. That's just the veneer of what they're claiming they want to do. And finally, just to support secular government, we all need to work together. I think the Minnesota groups here are doing a good job of that. We're kind of coming together today to do this. All of those that are here, attending events, joining groups that do the work that we do. So whether it's FFRF, the ACLU, Americans United, Minnesota Atheists, all of these groups, Humanists MN, we count our members, and it's helpful when we're talking to legislators and showing that we have a large amount of people that agree with us. And so I'll just conclude with a note about the perseverance, and that little girl who I'll call Jessica from West Virginia. She had to endure a huge ordeal. This challenge in her environment, her school environment, was very difficult. And she was just a young kid, and her mother became an outcast in her community. You can imagine that. If you're the one fighting a 75-year-long Bible practice, people aren't going to like you. But in the end, they achieved something really important that had a lasting impact. Since 2022, no school children had to go through what Jessica went through. And I think it shows that us staying in that fight, persevering through those hard times really can bring a meaningful impact and have a lasting change for future generations. Thank you.
And is Representative Finke here? There you are, yes. So please help me welcome now, returning to the legislators, whom we thank for their time, Representative Leigh Finke of representing the DFL in District 66A.
Hello, everyone. I've not spoken at this event before, so I'm very happy to be with you here today. If you don't know me, my name is Leigh Finke. I use she, her pronouns. I represent St. Paul and Roseville and Falcon Heights and Lauderdale, that little corner off 280. And I've been here for 4 years, and I'm very happy to be here with you today speaking about the importance of a secular government. I know you've heard from a lot of my colleagues. You have other speakers, so I apologize if I'm repeating what you've already been hearing, but I'm going to anyways. So I'm not an atheist. I know that's not a requirement. I'm actually a person of deep faith and spiritual history. That's a part of who I am, and I've generally kept that kind of close to the chest as I've been here. It's not been important to me for other people to know. Some of the history that I come from, I went to evangelical college. I've had a long, difficult relationship with my own queerness and transness, and I'm very happy and satisfied being able to live the life that I am living in the state of Minnesota. And I want to just share, thank you very much. Yeah, it's a big fucking deal, frankly. And the reason I'm here to talk to you today is that, I want to talk to you a little bit as a person who ran on pluralism and ran on the idea that of a culture in which all people not just are tolerated, but are able to thrive, for the reason of what it means to be on the opposite end of a nationalist religious government when you are a part of a group that government has decided should be eradicated, right? And a lot of what we talk about when we talk about the government in religious terms is about how there is indoctrination flowing from Christian nationalism into the lives of the people of this country. And that's wrong, and I hate it, and it needs to be taken care of. But there is another part of it, which is you always have groups of people by said governments that are targeted for eradication. And right now, that's trans people. The people that I serve with up here, they will just tell you there are no trans people. There are no trans people. And they are working with their fascist president to illegally erase the concept of trans people. It is not hypothetical. It is not a future threat. It is a religious tenet held by the most powerful government in the world that transgender people should be gone. Erased from public life is the language that they use. So when I think about how to interact with the concept of a secular government, one, of course, we need a secular government because that is right and good and the intention of the American project in the first place. But on a secondary level, I want you all to know that the nationalist government that we are facing, this Christian, white Christian evangelical nationalism that has become the thing that has warped into this government, it's coming for us, for real, for real. Like they had an executive order that erases us and says those of us who won't be erased should be institutionalized or arrested. That's what we're talking about. And it is not pretend, and it is not fiction. I didn't come up here to come so hard at this, but I feel like this is an audience that I need to share this with, because we have seen governments like this in the past, and we have seen where governments like this in the past have taken their beliefs. And we have seen how it has harmed not just the communities that are targeted, and it is by no means only my community. But when you do it, and when you do it without consequence or regard for human life, you end up in very, very dark places that I don't need to repeat. We all know where this kind of thinking goes. We see this over and over throughout the history of humanity. There are always men who believe that they understand what the world should look like, and they set about getting rid of anyone who doesn't fit. And I think that's the most important thing that I want to end with, is that the point of these kinds of movements is to take anyone different and get rid of them, right? The weirdos. I talk about the weirdos, but it can be different in any way. No matter who you are, if you are not fitting into the pre-designed, accepted version of humanity, you are expendable, or worse, a threat needing to be eradicated. So I always come out and I always tell people to be as weird and non-conforming as possible. It is the most powerful tool that we have against conformity of the kind that we are seeing from this government. And not just from this government, but from places much closer to home, up and down the power structure you see these kinds of movements. So thank you for letting me come here, sharing a little bit of how I'm feeling right now. Also to just hold that men like this come, but men like this also go, right? They all go eventually into the dustbin of history. That is, all of them are in the same place, the dustbin of history. And he will be too. Anyways, thank you so much for standing up here, sitting with us, but standing for our values. I believe so deeply in the work that you all are doing. I am a former ACLUer. I am a strong First Amendment defender and a believer in a true pluralistic democracy of the kind that we have always strived for but never achieved. And I'm here to hopefully make it a little bit more of a reality in Minnesota. Thank you guys so much for having me.
All right, we have 3 more speakers to conclude with on our schedule, who are longtime friends of mine. Grant Steves is one whom I have not seen for much too long. He's a past chair of Minnesota Atheists, a past facilitator of a secular Bible study group, a retired teacher, an avid reader, and with a home library of over 1,000 books, and an advocate for secular government. Please help me welcome Grant Steeves.
Good afternoon. We have heard about a virus in our society, and I'm here to talk about it. It attacks our judgment. It does not share our sense of reality and our ability to reason together. More than 2 centuries ago, Thomas Jefferson confronted this virus. It was the Danbury Baptist Association, where they were very worried about the Congregationalists because they might take power and they would restrict the liberty of those Baptists. And Jefferson wrote in response in 1802 that there is a wall of separation between church and state. It has been designed to protect the freedom of conscience for believers and for non-believers. It was put into the Constitution. In Western culture, religion is often described as a belief in the supernatural. Anthropologists emphasize how religions also function as systems that organize meaning into dogma, define purpose as doctrine, and a religious text as the source of truth. I think that distinction is very important because any belief system can claim ultimate authority and demand obedience. Historical examples of religious nationalist governments are the Soviet Union under Stalin, Mao's China, and more recently Kim Jong-un in North Korea. They demand loyalty, they enforce orthodoxy, and they punish dissent. The founders of this nation feared that kind of power, whether it came from a church aligned with the state or the state adopting the posture of a church. And their fear was not theoretical. It was born out of experience. Many early Americans had lived under governments where religious authority was backed by law. In fact, in my case, in 1600, I had ancestors that did that very thing. They came to this country, where the state was endorsing religions, where dissent carried real consequences in those countries. Even after American independence, we struggled. We struggled to live up to our ideals because of religious dogma, supporting what? Racism. The Civil War was not only a political crisis, it was a moral one. Fought over slavery and the denial of basic rights to millions of African Americans. Yes, it was a religious battle. The Enlightenment offered a different vision. It challenged the idea that authority comes from the divine right, and instead insisted that power rests with the people. In a democracy, leaders are not ordained, they are elected. That shift required something essential: a government that does not become a religion. Because a government organized as a religion is designed, dogmatic, and liberty requires that freedom to believe is preeminent. The Constitution states this principle clearly. In Article 6, prohibits any religious test for public officials. And it requires those who serve in that capacity to swear an oath, not to a church, not to a person, but to the Constitution itself. In our pluralistic democracy, laws must be grounded in our Constitution and the equal rights of people, and not in some religious text. Government officials are not appointed by God to preach and pray, as one of our, he's called the Secretary of Defense or War, has done. But they are servants and appointed by the people, and they're there for the people. Today we are seeing the rise of white religious nationalism. That is the original virus. It replaces science with dogma. Health, education, and welfare, Secretary Kennedy. Debate is with algorithms, evidence with information manipulation, and liberty with control. The Constitution does not defend itself. The wall that Jefferson described will not collapse overnight, but it will, and it is, slowly eroding, gradually, until one day we will look up and realize it's gone. What's the cure? What's the vaccine that actually proved to be true? It is found in our constitutional history. Learn it. Think critically. Demand evidence. Citizens must question authority and promote the facts and defend freedom for all. And above all, vote. Vote. Because the survival of your constitutional government depends on what? Voting. Go out and vote. And get your neighbors to vote. Even those that are religious, if they vote the right way, that is. Thank you.
So thank you all for coming out.